Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me, and I feel truly honored to be included in this conversation and have an opportunity to share a number of thoughts and concerns which seemed important and worthy of investigation even before the era of new normal, but proved to be of even greater significance now when we're forced to reimagine our relationships with the cities we visit or inhabit. This research was incited by the illumination developed for Shanghai's iconic skyline prior to CIIE in 2018, which covered in a stunning light display 22 kilometers of buildscape along the Huangpu River. Mesmerizing depictions of it circulated also quite widely online, as well as on the urban screens, because delightful videos featuring this illumination in close relation to the supposed spirit of the city and the country were made to accompany CIEE in 2018 and 2019. This illumination was proudly presented to the participants and discussed during the last year LUCI annual general meeting hosted in Shanghai. The number of analogous illuminations designed by different Chinese cities this year to celebrate 71st anniversary of the founding of PRC, and in many cases also country's victory over COVID-19 pandemic, indicate beyond any doubt that such festive light projections closely linked to China's national pride and growing confidence are likely to become a visual phenomenon of growing importance in Chinese visual and political culture. While these illuminations can raise multiple concerns, including some of those discussed last year in Shanghai and related to environmental or health issues, I want to focus on cultural repercussions of such initiatives. I want to raise the issue of gradually suppressed local identity and cultural uniqueness of a particular city for the sake of a greater story of China's growth and international prestige. Shanghai has been entrusted by the government with national responsibility to become an influential Chinese city in the world. While the Huangpu River illumination certainly succeeds in broadcasting for the world the story of an accomplished modernity, Shanghai's history and distinct cultural identity seems to disappear from the story and dilute. This may not be the intention, but it definitely is a fact. Cultural practices related to light, as well as distinct nocturnal lightscapes, are an integral part of cultural heritage of each city, and as such should be protected. We have to recognize that in many ways lighting is in fact culturally distinct, and every city has a number of light-related practices, both religious and secular, which speak of its unique history and cultural identity. Therefore, it seems desirable to actively seek ways to protect them and reflect as many of them as possible in the urban illuminations. Rather than, or in parallel to searching motivation or inspiration in competition with other cities of global significance, Shanghai could engage with local heritage of light, shadow, and darkness, and as a matter of fact, dare to reverse the threatening trend towards globalization of the lightscapes in the cosmopolises. When we think about lighting schemes for our cities, we should think how to make them culturally distinct, making it possible to distinguish one city from another using other factors than just distinct skylines these illuminations embrace. In other words, we really should ask how can we make sure that spectators can almost instantly tell the difference between, for instance, lit-up Shanghai and Kuala Lumpur, or Shanghai and Shenyang, judging just by the lighting features, appearing as culturally specific and ideally somehow unique even within a single culture or country. We need to question the trend in which there is no major difference in terms of lighting scheme between illuminations developed, for instance, for the Acropolis in Athens and Huangpu River in Shanghai, both equally mesmerizing but deprived of unique history and identity which these places maintain throughout the day. So one of the questions I hope to contribute to our conversation is, what are we truly lighting after all in Shanghai? Impressive infrastructure or actually our urban heritage? Are we lighting hospitable spaces or three-dimensional monuments to an accomplished modernization? Why do we expect people to come visit and watch such illuminations? To pay tribute to China, or to commit, to be enchanted, or to engage with the unique cultural energy of this place? Perhaps a sufficiently vivid example of cultural emergency we're gradually facing, and the increasing conflict between the cultural tradition of the place and extravagant illuminations, which I'm trying to highlight here, was witnessed by Shanghai this year on October 1st, when China's National Day overlapped with Middle-Autumn Festival. I believe that there is no need to introduce to this audience cultural and spiritual significance of the moon and moon calendar for China in the past. It's enough to remind us that traditionally appreciation of the full moon has been one of the central activities of the festive night, but this year in the Bund it was almost impossible to notice the moon among all the lights, which have become more and more dynamic, asynchronous, and dazzling since in 2018 the illumination was first introduced. In fact, it was easier for me to get into a proper festive mood in my quarantine room in the outskirts of Tianjin, where the full moon cast my shadow on the floor, and a mooncake was delivered to my door by quarantine assistants wearing hazmat suits, on which some of them had handwritten a famous line from Du Fu's poem Thinking of My Brothers on a Moonlit Night, which reads, "The same moon shines where I grew up," in translation by David Young. Then for my friend Michel Gernot, who actually was outdoors that night and took the video, which I'll show now, from the terrace of M on the Bund in Shanghai. Light is usually set to help to develop new identities for cities and places. So are we ever concerned with how this new identity relates to the past? Does it sincerely build on it, draw inspiration from it, and maintain a creative continuity? Or does it rather more or less deliberately transform it, and perhaps even distort it for the sake of certain political or economic interests? Whenever we say something like, the city's lighting heritage aims to highlight the rich heritage, are we able to pinpoint which exactly elements actually got highlighted, and how the use of light itself or visual content included in the illumination reflect rich heritage of the particular city? Are we truly eager to work in parallel to the innovative use of new materials and products towards more meaningful approaches in terms of culturally nuanced story? Or do we simply rely on slogans, which are certainly crucial for development of tourism, real estate industries, and city branding, but are not that much beneficial for placemaking, settling in, and personal integrity of the inhabitants? What both the flamboyant illuminations and their masterfully edited video depictions encourage in the viewers is an attitude of a passive spectatorship, which involves little wandering around and little critical observation of the city one inhabits. Flaneurs and flaneuses are likely to die out in Shanghai. Moreover, it seems that the city is being increasingly approached as a spectacle and consumable good. It's often being taken care within a framework of competition inside China and on the global scale, prestigious indexing, etc., instead of taking into consideration dwelling, bonding, belonging at the grassroots. How can we resist this ongoing tendency, matching so bitterly the current social distancing requirements, but predating the pandemic, to watch our cities using drones, corresponding to the dominant top-down approaches in city management, or phone screens, merely as remote, Instagrammable spectacles from which we become increasingly disconnected? The illuminated story of Shanghai's modernity, accomplished at impressive pace, is certainly true and worthy of attention in many ways, but it is also likely to act like a visual drug, which gradually affects perception and paralyzes ability to feel the city in different ways, to make effort to connect to it in a deeper, personal, and meaningful way. The story, which is never depicted in the videos capturing fabulous illuminations, is how such increasingly excessive lighting interferes with daily routines and intimate settings of people who actually make Shanghai their home. On some nights, Shanghai does not resemble a hospitable shelter, but rather an anxious gauze invading personal spaces. Even people who live far from the Bund, but whose windows face east, can get tired of light rehearsals for festive displays, or find it difficult to focus on creative work when too many buildings are blinking all around. Why would one have to sit at a desk by the window in one's home overlooking beloved city with a closed curtain? Why would one be expected to accept the impossibility of returning home from the swimming pool via usual route along Suzhou Creek, just because the police blocked the streets to secure safe flow of thousands of spectators into the Bund? Shall we uncritically come to terms with the condition that during holidays, Shanghainese inhabitants often lose access to the heart of their city to a crowd of incomers who indeed spend money here, but seek only a temporary enchantment? Who owns the city in the 21st century? Who owns today's Shanghai? This issue of passive spectatorship gains even more importance during the era of new normal, when traveling is limited and any individual subjective explorations of the city may easily become much more difficult or even impossible. On the one hand, mesmerizing videos which cities create to brand themselves attract capital and welcome virtual participants on the international events. Are a useful tool to impress and provide a valuable overview of the host city. On the other hand, however, we should be aware that this is always a very selective, carefully directed, both in terms of lighting and video production view, and therefore an important question should follow. Do we want to agree on such a unidimensional story of our city and its light heritage, or can we make it more complex and intricate? Can we multiply the amount of stories of urban identity told using light displays? Can we reimagine light and urban lightscape as a truly connecting factor? Can we bring the factual cultural diversity and light culture diversity of a particular city into such big-scale illuminations? Should or could nocturnal lightscapes change over the year just as much as the daytime light does? Can urban illumination become something different, something more than what we're getting used to now? Can we object the tendency to present us with something which on the surface appears to be an immersive experience, but in fact is alienating us from the city of our birth, choice, or fate? I want to conclude my talk with a short story of my recent return to Shanghai after being trapped for 8 long months in Europe. Even though on the way home I experienced exactly the distancing and alienation which I mentioned above, eventually it got better. Indeed, at first I could hardly see the match-mist city from the taxi windows due to glare caused by the aggressive light set along some parts of the elevated roads, probably to illuminate the road for people watching it from the terraces from afar. But when I arrived in my darkish lane, I got a message from a friend telling me to go to a tiny wonton place nearby to collect a welcome package she had left there for me as a surprise. 2 lamps set at the entrance to that shop revealed to me a very different story of Shanghai as a living city, and in many ways meant so much more than the shimmering Pudong skyline which I could see in the horizon from the plane after landing at Hongqiao Airport. Those 2 lamps spoke to me about connectedness, trust, late hours of people's labor here. They communicated discreetly of persistence, perseverance, and living presence in a durable city, just as vernacular illuminations of the living compounds displayed to people trapped in nearby buildings reveal the story of life patiently sustained by others against any difficulties, of work continued by necessity in a different time zone, or perhaps sleeplessness caused by overwhelming anxiety. In cities and towns of different size, the skyline may have gone out during the lockdowns or changed color to honor the frontline workers, but in many cases, it was actually the overlooked, underestimated, and unrecorded light patterns that communicated every night about everybody's continuous effort to carry on against all the darkness. And I just think we should make effort to recognize it. Thank you.